about NFTs, and it's so interesting to hear from them about their vision of what they can do with it. We walk through a lot of metaphors and analogies, of sort of reservoirs and ways that people can sort of like use them. It sounds like really, really early innings, but a good place to start, Michael, is that there are even earlier innings. There's a whole backstory before 2021 when NFTs and this $10 term, non-fungible tokens, entered into the dictionary. If you could unpack that for us. Thank you, Mike.
Sure. So technically the original NFTs were colored coins. This is back in the early days of Bitcoin when people realized that there's 100 million Satoshi in a Bitcoin, but you could go in and color each Satoshi by putting something in the memo field. And so there were people who were playing with like, hey, I'm going to take one Bitcoin, which at the time was maybe worth like, $10, and I'm going to divide this in, I'll just own one Bitcoin, but I'm going to create a whole world that has 100 million moving parts, and they're each non-fungible because this one, it's still worth one Bitcoin, but it's also worth, whatever the value of the collectible is inside it. The colored coins were complicated. They never really got off the ground. The first one that got off the ground was also built on Bitcoin. It was actually built on Counterparty, which was a asset layer creation platform built on Bitcoin. That's where Rare Peppies came from. That was really kind of the first NFT that had any kind of scaling at all. And it's funny because, I used to work with Counterparty back in the day. Counterparty at one point had 30% of the platforms on the CoinMarketCap top 100. It was very easy to create fungible tokens and then also NFTs. And I'm still in like an OG group, and everybody's like, "Man, does anybody have any Rare Peppies left?" And like, nobody did. And I've got a company that I work with. I've got about a dozen companies. So my background is I've been an advisor, investor, and marketer in the crypto space since early 2013. And got a PR and marketing firm called Transform Group. We got about a dozen companies here. And then I'm advising companies on NFT, DeFi, and gaming strategies as well. So I've got about a dozen companies here at the show, including Michael Cohen's NFT. The last panel mentioned. In fact, after this, I'm going because we got ABC Nightline going down to cover it. So it's always nice to get the celebrity. Celebrities drive kind of involvement, even though the earliest people are taking longer. But Mint Gold Dust is here, and at NFT NYC, they actually got $500,000 for a Rare Peppy.
So it's not. Yeah. Round of applause for that, and for Andy Cohen, right?
Yeah. Michael Cohen, yeah.
Oh, Michael Cohen. Sorry about that. And so I was going to offer up, just to read it back to you, that was a zombie project, no pun intended, but it's not. You just established it's still.
Well, no, they lasted forever. People lost their keys. They abandoned it because really Counterparty ended up kind of dying as a platform for the simple reason that even the code was great. It was built on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin ended up having the fees go so high that before you had SegWit, it could cost as much as $20 to send something. Any kind of similarity about why Polygon's doing better than Ethereum now for a lot of new platforms because the fees are too high? That's a problem with proof-of-work software, is that the fees get too high when they get more popular and you have to move to a new platform, and that's a perpetual problem until it's figured out. I mean, there are a few platforms like Ripple now has NFTs, they're very low, a lot of other proof of staking technologies. I'm in a project called Aspire, which took the original code from Counterparty, and they built it on a non-Bitcoin platform, which is a gas coin that has like 1 million, kind of gas tokens for like 10 cents, and so you can just go to AspireArmy.com and you can get some free Aspire. But so there's a war for platforms now, and a lot of it revolves around ease of use, adoption by bigger projects. And then celebrities. I mean, you'll be able to talk a little bit about what Wax has been doing, which we're both involved in terms of just bringing a lot of early, kind of well-known brands.
And certainly, and you brought up a lot of interesting points. One was about, what a lot of this talk is about was what's happened already. One of those was costs, right? And you said crypto puppies was built on Bitcoin. The fees were really high. we hear and got a lot of emails even for this panel, Merlin, about discussion on the Ethereum platform, how gas fees are high for NFTs that some of the creators there are doing. But just to unpack a bit more on those who are uninitiated on you, I got a really interesting backstory. You started your first job in tech at a very young age. You could share.
Yeah, so I worked, my name is Merlin Kauffman. I started working for AOL at 11 years old. I was 18 years old in a job application, got hired remotely. And basically run the proprietary programming language called Rain Man. Can you hear me now? Hey! That's basically I learned AOL's proprietary programming language called Rain Man. It's around like 1996, 97. And I got moved to a volunteer-only position on forums like AOL, Keyword Apple, and Youth Tech. So anyway, I did that, co-founded a wireless internet company in high school called eWireless. Created one of the first wireless hotspots that have like login, password authentication on the web, so like coffee shops could collect user data and monetize banner ads. And went on to start buying intellectual property, which is the baseline of what NFTs actually are. So I basically amassed a portfolio of 60,000 .com domain names. So that's sort of like my entry point back in the day into IP NFT space. And I went on to found Soothe Massage app, Uber Massage, in 2013, and did some Bitcoin mining.
Thanks for that contribution to bettering all of our lives. Soothe, you said the Uber of massage. Right? Yes.
Gotta do massage, man. So basically, I got back into the crypto NFT world though about 65 days ago. I bought my first NFT, which was a Bored Ape. I bought this Bored Ape, DMT skin type. He's basically, on the shirt, but basically I created a character out of this guy because the Bored Ape NFTs, which I think most people are probably aware of, right? Like everybody's seen these.
Let's unpack these. So there's a lot of terminology out there. A lot of people in our audience have seen the Bored Ape sort of trade name, and maybe they've seen a picture. They don't really even know what that means. If you could just unpack that.
Yeah. So you guys like on Twitter, on Instagram, have you seen like pictures of like monkeys? Like
you can raise your hands.
Raise your hands. You got one. Go. You've seen it. Yeah, it's so popular now, and it's like taking over the dialogue of what's happening with Art Basel this year. Like NFTs are really the dominating topic of conversation. And these guys at Bored Apes, they're leading the way. They sold $94 million worth of mutant apes in like 45 minutes in their next collection.
And just to clarify on that, repeat it back to you, that's like a derivative project, right? That they dropped into the community. So there's a community of Bored Apes holders, and there's a second rendition called Mutant Apes.
Yeah, and it's basically a trickle-down effect. Like the first Bored Ape they owned had a utility value that trickled down, and they shared the economics with the community. And I think that's the big paradigm shift with NFTs, is that there's a trickle-down economy, and it's not just this like completely centralized like monopoly thing. It's actually sharing the benefits with the holders through live events. If you own a Bored Ape, you can show up and like go to like a concert of like a really big musician, or like go on a yacht cruise, and that's your entry pass. You don't have to buy a ticket. You're part of this exclusive club. So what they also did, they included 100% commercial usage rights with the Bored Ape. So if you own one, like I bought mine, I could take that Bored Ape and turn him into my own character, which I did. I created, my Bored Ape is now known as Dr. DMT, because he has this like DMT fur with eyes on it. And so anyway, I called him Dr. DMT. I thought when I bought him, I want to make my own NFT collection. But there's like all these animal collections, like the zoo of like NFTs. There's like apes, monkeys, pigs, whatever. What about dinosaurs? So I go, dinosaurs in the metaverse. Metasaurs. So I make Metasaurs, start working on it the first day. And I turn my character, my Bored Ape, Dr. DMT, as he's now known, into the meta scientist and creator of the Metasaurs. So I've taken this first project, Bored Apes, and I've created this side storyline. It's like a derivative kind of project, but it's completely refocused on what is now my brand, which is Metasaurs, but there's a character from another collection that's been blended into that lore. And so it was very effective. We grew from 0 to 230,000 people in a five-day period. It's one of the fastest growing NFT projects in history.
Congrats on that. Certainly,
well, and I was going to say one particular aspect of the IP that you seized on really early was your 1 in 10,000, realistically more like 1 in 4,000, because some people have multiple Bored Apes, people who have access into this powerful community, and you're able to tell the people in there what you've done, and they're like, oh, I like that, I'm going to buy some as well. And so it's like being, in a private club. So, this private club is not just about the access of being able to, go and get on a yacht. It's also, being in the World Economic Forum of like the NFT space to be able to go message people, I have this new project.
Yeah, that's what we did. Our first marketing was, we went to the Bored Ape Discord server and said, hey, there's a pre-list, whitelist registration for first mints to the Bored Ape holders as a utility.
Certainly, and since you mentioned again the IP, Michael, I do want to go with you in that and really establish that, because there's some haziness in that in just a moment. But we're down the rabbit hole, and I just want to make sure everyone's following along in the audience. Clearly established that Bored Ape was one of the most popular NFT projects. It's a big drop. A lot of different people bought it. But then what you did was slightly different. You're going to modify the IP because you owned it to create your own drop of Metasaurs, and you view, is really interesting for the creators back there to repeat this back to you. That's not it. It's not just about selling some NFT. It's about what the owners then do with it, which is get almost like a dividend, like all sorts of benefits, like owning as an owner of the Metasaurs Club, which might include access and tickets to things and attention. And that's what Michael just established as well. So just make sure everyone's following along. And then, Michael, there is some confusion out there because in the last panel, Adam referred to a lot of NFTs. The NFT holders don't own the IP. In Merlin's case, he did and does. Can you help distinguish those two scenarios for us?
Well, this is still a point of controversy that has not been resolved in this early market about IP rights. And William Quigley, who started Wax, we've both done a lot of work with over the years. He says that's the single issue that's going to be the big issue as things go on. Because, for example, right now on Wax, there is this thing called Blockchain Heroes that was developed by some friends of mine in Puerto Rico. They didn't tell me they were doing it. And they basically hired a cartoonist, and I'm one of the blockchain heroes, the Crusader.
I see like a likeness of you, which
it's a likeness of me with like a weapon and everything like that. And someone said, "Hey, I just bought you." And I was like, I didn't get my rights up, but I was fine. I considered it to be, I guess I'm a public figure and this and that. I was like, dude, can you at least give me one? I know they were like $10, but it would have been nice, Haven't got one yet, but I did still copy it and put it on as my background on like my Facebook splash for a while, as opposed to the one that's my profile picture is an actual NFT. And so I think that you're going to have the issues of rights, and a lot of times it's I've been involved with some projects where they're photographers, right? And the photographers took a picture of, say, Mick Jagger. Well, is his rights as the photographer owning that photo? He's not allowed to put it on a T-shirt, but he is allowed to sell that. Is he allowed to sell, And a lot of times they were vague in the contracts about what your rights are. Nobody talked about NFTs when the photos were taken in the 70s, right? Okay, you're allowed to take this, and you can make a litho of up to such and such. What about an NFT? I mean, I think for the most part, the best practice is to go back to the original artist and say, hey, we have a brand new thing. I own the rights to the photo. You own the rights to your name. Let's make a deal so that you'll add value by actually, kind of adding something to it. I bought a couple of years ago Mike Tyson's old house from The Hangover in the place next door. And, I recently connected with a guy who was doing Mike Tyson's NFTs, and I was like, I want to go in and do NFTs of some of the items in the house because my wife wants to redesign it. And I was like, do not get rid of that giant jacuzzi tub that Mike Tyson had until it's an NFT, but it'll be more valuable. So I could do it without him and just say it's Mike Tyson's, but I think it's much more valuable if I have him tell stories about all the things that happened in that tub. And, and so, I mean, that's I think what's going to be really fascinating over the next few years is where the IP rights develop. The other one, of course, is what isn't the security. There are things like, one of my favorite projects was about a month before Bored Apes, is CyberCogs. And they give you these fungible tokens called bananas that literally at one point you were getting like about 20%, kind of interest for just holding the NFT and earning bananas.
A lot of bananas.
A lot of bananas. You can sell the bananas, but the question is, you need to be an accredited investor to get this. I mean, the NFTs are not largely, but if the fungible token is then considered to be a security, even though it's aired, I mean, just like in the early days of Bitcoin, they didn't know what to do with it.
It's a great prelude to a panel that will come after this. We'll have attorney Andy Lee on from Foley to unpack a lot of these exact issues. But to summarize, this sounds, Michael, like it's still a really big issue. Who owns copyright, but nonetheless, for the creators and for the audience, for the owners, the opportunity is there. Just to unfold this some more on the benefits side, Michael. It's a question. Do you see it this way? As really the primary function, at least right now, is it's not just the NFT, but you're excited about what people can then do with it.
Yeah, I think for the most part that that's really the exciting piece. I mean, NFTs wasn't about just the art or about the scarcity of the art. It was, as you said, the ability to actually own the IP and then be able to be inside of this powerful community. One of the 10,000 characters signed a deal with creative artists to develop a series. So as opposed to with CryptoPunks, the creator of Larva Labs signed a deal to shop around a series. Here, just one of the 10,000, like you created the Metasaurs, he created something called like Bernie the Valet or Benny the Valet. Okay. But again, it's because he owned the right to that one of 10,000. So that's just, and that's something where you're really big, but you can still do variations on it. Right now I'm advising an artist that's been popular on the West Coast, Shag, who is one of the pioneers of kind of like lowbrow school of art. He does like all this cocktail culture stuff. And we're debating on this first NFT drop, which is kitty cats, it's kitty cats with Q's instead of a K. And they're like cats. And there's 10,300. They actually were doing the reverse way at Comic-Con where they were selling actual physical prints and then you get an NFT with it. And now they're like debating getting prints when you buy your NFT at the drop. And randomizing is so that if you get a particular rare one, you may end up getting an original that are worth tens of thousands of dollars, just like the Pokemons do. And so it's very creative there. And then the whole idea, we were just discussing this, last night at my condo, do we want to go and give up rights to that one little piece of IP? And there's pluses and minuses.
We didn't. That was interesting.
I figured you didn't because you already took one and you said, I got this one thing and train stops here.
Yeah. I kind of learned the lesson, if anybody can create a derivative project, it's lucky that I have a high quality brand, but you jeopardize your own brand, letting just anybody run any project and eventually doing scams, using a Metasaur, using a Bored Ape. So we said, we own the commercial usage rights, but if you're very interested in actually doing a real project and you're a real team, then no problem, come to us and we might be able to give you permission to do a series or a show or whatnot.
Certainly, and the basis of this, even though the law can get and the jurisprudence can get a little complicated. Again, we'll hear a lot on that later. In a nutshell, a lot of the genesis of all this is the IP, and just the attorney in me had just had this idea. It's almost like Bored Ape was like franchising, and you were one of the franchisees to then produce Metasaurs and probably other projects. One thing that, for the creators out there, just to read this back to both of you, there's a lot of blood that they can squeeze from that turnip. It's not just the content. The content's just a start. It's what they can drop into the access and everything else that you all described. And there's one particular area, because we got a lot of emails on this, and when I say a lot, I mean 6 or 7. But it was on games. Games seem to be thematically something that everyone's interested in. Intuitively, Merlin and Michael, it seems like a next step that's already happened. What can you do with an NFT as a creator? Perhaps you need to enlist technologists, of course, to build the stuff. But what can you do with NFTs in terms of a gaming environment? Merlin, and then I'll go to you, Michael.
Yeah, so it's interesting because Metasaurs, we realized at some point, were perfectly positioned as a character for a game. We're like Metasaurs, kings of the metaverse, right? And so we go, we're going to make games. This goes on our roadmap. We promise the community we're going to deliver you some games. So a few conversations happened in the past month, and we ended up partnering with William Quigley, the founder of Wax, which is the biggest blockchain for gaming. Our NFTs are on Ethereum, but it's not possible to do gaming on Ethereum because of the high transaction fees. It's just not workable. So Wax is specifically built for gaming. And they have some of the biggest games in the world on their platform, like Alien Worlds and Farmer's World, both of which launched about 5 months ago, and have their in-game token is worth $2-3 billion for these games that launched 5 months ago. Like, we've never seen anything like this before. And these are NFT-based games. Right? People are buying these items and they're forging other items, they're upgrading their NFTs. And so anyway, we ended up forming a new company with William, and it's called Metagames. And it's a blockchain-based gaming studio.
I'm detecting a theme, by the way, among the names.
It's funny, and Meta, Facebook changed their name, but we had these names first, But anyway, so we created Metagames, and Metasaurs' official game is the first franchise game that we're doing with Metagames, and it's built on the Wax blockchain, and it's a play-to-earn game. So it's once again going back to this sharing with the community, because there's trickle-down economics. People are able to play these games, earn in-game tokens, and we share the economies of the game with the players. Whereas in the past, the game publisher just captures all the value, which isn't really fair. That's the old way. The new way is abundance and sharing, and that's our mission, to spread these games to 300 million plus people in the next 3 years, so that the community, so that the general public can realize just how raw the deal they've had playing games in the past and only paying the publisher, when in reality, they should be compensated for the time that they're spending and effort building these communities.
Certainly, and you mentioned Facebook earlier, and you also mentioned, the old way with publishers. That's what the sort of the crypto natives refer to as centralized systems, and then when an audience or holders or owners are able to participate along with the IP.
When you want to do gaming, you're going to look at Solana, you're going to look at Wax, you're going to look at other lower cost entities that still allow you to have the gamification, the speed of transactions, and I think that it's very different to say, to use like an old world analogy, him moving to Wax was not like porting from Android to the iPhone, or porting from like Sony PlayStation to a competitive platform that'll take a year to go and rebuild, right? This is more like when you're playing something, whether it's built on Unity or on Unreal Engine, that's in the back, right? And so most people will have, one wallet, and it's going to have multiple chains on it. I mean, if it's on Ledger or Trezor, it's you just take your tokens, launch the app, and it all works on the same platforms. It's the back end. It's more like the Unreal Engine. And so because of that, that means that most people are going to, have 20 different platforms that are used for different things. I'll use Solana if it's what is required to play Star Atlas, and I want to play Star Atlas. I'm not going to have it if I'm, if everything ends up going to Wax. So that's just sort of this multi-chain future, which is enabled by the fact that it's very seamless, because you don't need 9 wallets. It's not like the walled garden days. We both worked with AOL back in the old days, right? Yeah, I launched the greenhouse back there. They were very much about keeping the walled garden, and we were actually hired to try to convince people from the internet to move to AOL, because the internet was going nowhere. We kind of came back and said, actually, you're wrong, and you probably need to go and get people to maybe develop on AOL and then invest in the things on the internet. And the first thing that came out of that project was the Motley Fool.
It's certainly the question I want to ask that relates to all this. It almost sounds peculiar then that words like Bitcoin, which most of the audience that is ours thinks of that as more of the cryptocurrency. So you also referenced Ethereum. You referenced earlier also, Polygon, obviously now Wax. It's almost it sounds like an oddity though that people would know. What sounds like, to continue the metaphor analogy, Michael, is under the car engine, or sort of like the behind the scenes real engine. Are you saying then that
it's open IP as well, right? The reason why he was able to build the whole Metasaur community was because Bored Apes let him go and do that, right? And the reason why Polygon went from like a penny to $2 in the last year is because they were able to go and take the Talicton closed source EVM. The Ethereum virtual machine was open source, and anybody can kind of build around that. And Polygon is like, hey, if fees are too high, then, and Clayton and a few others are like, we're going to build something and speed it up. And there's a lot of different solutions. Some are layer 1, like Phantom and Binance Smart Chain, or you're actually leaving here and going on their layer 1, and they'll have different speed of development. You know, Polygon's layer 2, so it's just, you know, kind of using kind of a bridge to make these faster. You're still effectively running it on Ethereum. And so those are different things that are, and they all help in the end of the day Ethereum, quite frankly.
Yeah, certainly, and just to dovetail into that, because creators are so curious about this and the degree to which they need to know this generally. Because you established earlier, one thing you said when we were listening was that Ethereum fees were too high, so you know, it's all relative, and that's why you went to Wax. Is this something that
$150 is too high?
Yeah. Okay, and so really, just to repeat this back to you as an answer, it sounds like it depends on the use case.
Exactly, it totally depends on the use case. And it's interesting because most of the blue chip projects in NFT collectibles, like the Bored Apes of the world, the CryptoPunks of the world, they go for $500,000 each. You know, they're all built on Ethereum. Because of that, people who are, you know, collectors who are speculating when they mint these collections, when they buy these NFTs, they're sort of thinking, this could be the next CryptoPunks, this could be the next Bored Ape. And the irony is, everybody hates these gas fees, but it's like a utilization tax, right? Because of their popularity, it's like a liquidity tax, because these are the most liquid NFTs.
Well, and of course, right now in the short term, while they're waiting for the sharding of Ethereum 2.0 to take place, they started this thing of burning Ethereum to make it more scarce, to make up for the fact that you're like cringingly paying these gas fees, but the Ethereum you're still holding should go up in value because they're burning it for everything.
Scarcity.
Yeah, I mean, they've burned like $6-7 billion of Ethereum. And, you know, sure enough, I mean, the price of Ethereum has gone up since they started doing that.
It's certainly some predictability to that. And since you all are talking about price, is a natural thing that we got a lot of questions about too, Merlin and Michael. And there seems to be, you know, conflicting viewpoints that all of this is just generally, you know, a bubble. And I'm not just talking about cryptocurrency, but perhaps a better question is, you know, how big can this market, or aftermarket, perhaps even better, how can this aftermarket get for NFTs, especially given, you know, these use cases, and certainly we talked about gaming as one. Merlin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the general NFT market today, the biggest secondary market sales platform, OpenSea, only has something like a reported 300,000 to 500,000 users. In comparison, Coinbase, like the largest US-based exchange, publicly traded, they have about 60 million users, I believe, and they just announced that they're opening up their NFT marketplace in 2022. And like even since then, the demand for NFTs has gotten higher and higher and higher. I think they have like 10 million people on their waiting list. So if you like multiply the current existing secondary marketplace, OpenSea, which have 500K, let's say, people, it's like going to be at least 20 times more demand once they bring in the Coinbase user base and it gets broader appeal. It's like you know 2018.
Well, and most of the users on OpenSea are just looking. When they hit $3 billion in cumulative revenue, I mean, literally a year after they considered just shutting the doors because they weren't making enough money, they had 16,000 buyers for $3 billion of revenue. So right now it's really concentrated in a group of whales. But that's, I mean, we're so early in this space. I mean, yes, it's a bubble, but every great market starts at a bubble. The automobile industry started as a bubble. There were like 300 car makers, and you know, and then they all went out of business except for like GM and like, you know, whatever. You know, everybody remembers the .com bubble, or at least people who are my age or not too much younger. And it, you know, went from like everybody was like going public at these crazy valuations, and then it collapsed, and the good companies got punished along with the bad. I mean, there were people shorting Amazon when it was $5. Obviously, that was not a good thing to do because they weren't a scam. They weren't like, oh, fairy dust. They just happened to like take advantage of it going up, and then they just sort of survived when everybody said the internet's a scam. And so, you're going to probably have some massive pullback in NFTs that happens at the same time the crypto crash happens. If Ethereum goes down to like, you know, $500, you're going to probably have an even larger effect of people fleeing from NFTs and going back to ETH. But we don't know when that is or how low it's going to be, but it doesn't mean that the market's dead, it just means that you're in a cycle.
It sounds like, from a financial standpoint, NFTs, so narrowly in that lens, it's almost like they're like a leveraged play on top of the cryptocurrencies.
It's interesting because like when ETH runs and it starts to go up in price, like people often sell out of NFTs. They cycle out of NFTs to try to get into Ethereum to try to catch that run up.
Well, interesting. So it actually has a buffering effect, in fact, and not necessarily Not necessarily then a leverage play, but they're not quite perfectly correlated.
No, they're not quite.
Yeah, no, and of course the thing is that, obviously you can do other things with Ethereum because, you know that you've got a store of value with the NFT, and particularly if it's sort of staying at a slowly appreciating level, and you have to say, is it slowly appreciating at a rate above or beyond what I could go and get on DeFi? And that's, so obviously if you bought a, Bored Ape at 1,000, you sold it at 5,000, you made the wrong move. You weren't making that much. On the other hand, if you bought it at 1,000, sold it at 180,000, you're probably okay. But then you lose your access to the community unless you have 5 of them and sold 4 of them and then kept the one to stay in the community.
We're just about out of time. Merlin, I'm just going to give you the last word, but this has been an absolute treasure. I think I enjoyed it a lot. Merlin, for the audience, I'll give you the last word.
Hey, so everybody, thank you so much for being interested in NFTs. I think this is really the beginning. I feel like we're in like December or 2014 when Bitcoin was sort of just becoming, known, and I think we're going to get to this like Thanksgiving, Christmas, 2018 period in the next year and a half or 2 years of NFTs where it becomes a household, dinner time conversation with your family. So anyway, it's the beginning.
I was going to say, we just realized we first met in January of 2014 in Miami at the first big bubblicious North American Bitcoin conference when the bubble had just popped at like $1,100 Bitcoin and it was starting to go down. And, we had a press conference for this client of a 19-year-old kid who wrote a white paper called Vitalik Buterin. And, obviously it wasn't, Ethereum didn't even ship for another year, and it shipped around, it was 30 cents in the crowd sale, and then it shipped at 70 cents and kind of went down a little bit, and obviously now it's $4,600. So there's definitely, we're still right now, if you track the internet's growth, and Vitalik's dad, Dmitry Buterin, posted a chart, we're basically the same number of users that the internet was at the end of '97, about 200 million. And today there's over 4 billion on the internet. So we got a ways to go. 2000 when you got your first billion users on the internet.
Such helpful context. Absolute treasure. Big round of applause for Michael Terpin. Big round of applause for Michael Terpin. Absolute treasure, wealth and knowledge. And Merlin Kauffman, Metasaurs. Big round of applause for Merlin Kauffman with Metasaurs.